All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the YouTube channel, and we are continuing in our Tuesday Tao. It's Tuesday, at least it is for me, and we're reading Dr. Wayne Dyer's Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And today we are on the 16th verse of the Tao Te Ching. And so before I start rambling on, let's jump right into it. The 16th verse. Become totally empty. Let your heart be at peace. Amidst the rush of worldly comings and goings, observe how endings become beginnings. Things flourish, each by each, only to return to the source, to what is and what is to be. To return to the root is to find peace. To find peace is to fulfill one's destiny. To fulfill one's destiny is to be constant. To know the constant is called insight. Not knowing this cycle leads to eternal disaster. Knowing the constant gives perspective. This perspective is impartial. Impartiality is the highest nobility. The highest nobility is divine. Being divine, you will be at one with the Tao. Being at one with the Tao is eternal. This way is everlasting, not endangered by physical death. There ends the 16th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Each one of these, it just gets better and better. There's a few that have been my favorites so far, but this one really makes me think of, working at things in life and making projects, trying to see things through to their fulfillment through, the physical efforts or maybe the mental efforts that we apply towards things that we're doing in our lives. And maybe some of the lines that stick out and some of the words that stick out to me here is things flourish each by each. To return to the root is to find peace. To find peace is to fulfill one's destiny. See, that makes me think of, our purpose in life, finding your calling. And to fulfill, and then it says, in order to do that, to fulfill one's destiny is to be constant. So we have to be, like I said at the beginning of this year, one of the things that I learned from listening to, podcasts and reading books and things about the difference between successful and unsuccessful people is showing up. Or this thing here, which I may be taking in a different light than what it was getting at, but to fulfill your destiny, you have to be constant. That doesn't mean, like we talked about last week, doesn't mean you're constantly striving. I mean, there are times of rest, there's seasons for this constancy, but you have to maybe be continual in your practice and not be giving up. And to fulfill one's destiny is to be constant. To know the constant is called insight. And what I thought there was, through the process of attempting to fulfill your calling or fulfill your purpose through this consistent effort with rest in between. See, that's through this showing up at whatever it is you're trying to do, or showing up to whatever it is that you're trying to learn. And then this constant becomes, it says here, the constant is called insight, but I think it becomes knowledge and wisdom through applied knowledge in our continued practice. And then it says, not knowing this cycle leads to eternal disaster. To me, that says, if you don't know this, your life will be filled with question marks and folly. But see, this is just my perspective. And the very next thing it says, knowing the constant gives perspective. and it is impartial, and that is the highest nobility. So that comes back to a non-judgment. And then one of the key principles that the Tao is always about, and all spirituality, is this most important idea of the everlasting, not endangered by physical death. That we are spiritual beings having a physical experience rather than the other way around. All right, now let's get into Dr. Wayne Dyer's little essay here. He titles this one, Living with Constancy. The 16th verse of the Tao Te Ching describes the value of being supremely conscious of the constant cycle of all. Rather than viewing change as a disruptive, unwanted occurrence, you can choose to view the variances in your world as valuable influences in the cycle of a Tao-centered existence. Interesting. He's taking the viewpoint of dealing with change. When you see change as the only constant there really is, you start to recognize it as an expression of ongoing life. That's a welcome clue to your own purpose and meaning. See, getting back to that purpose, Jeff talks about it like great basic purpose. In this way, you're returned to the experience of your source and the peace of an impartial perspective. Begin this process by altering your ego-based thoughts and letting yourself feel the bliss of being at one with the Tao. And if that's a confusing statement, to do this thing and try to become one with the Tao, then I would advise going back to, the first or the second verses describing the nature of the Tao, or maybe even a couple verses ago, where it was like a description of God. I think I titled the video, but the Tao is something unique to have a good grasp on, even though that's a paradox in itself. But when it comes to these kind of suggestions, like begin the process of altering your ego-based thoughts and letting yourself feel the bliss of being at one with the Tao. A small example would be like when you let go of your worries and you're really enjoying a sunset. Simple example there. All right. Then become an acute observer of how your world really works and allow yourself to be in harmony with the cyclical nature of all living things. See, now that's talking about becoming, to me, anyways, I'm just paraphrasing. These are all my random thoughts popping in. Thought experiments. That's paraphrasing to me the process of once you observe with this, what does it say in the verse over here, this impartiality of perspective, then you can begin to see the workings of the nature of reality in a way to where you can begin to work with it. It's almost like once you realize that you float in the water, you no longer fight against it and you work with it. Then become an acute observer of your world and how it really works and allow yourself to be in harmony with it. And then you become in harmony with the cyclical nature of all living things. There's an immutable cycle of no life, life, no life that we're part of. All things come and then they go. Life materializes in a variety of forms. It's here, and then at some point it ends in what we call death. This coming and going might seem to be a temporary condition, but it's actually the ultimate constant because it never ceases. Embrace this nature of cyclical change and you'll thrive. And see, I think when focusing on the death example there, it makes it kind of grim. But when you look at the cyclical change, that last 6 words there, cyclical change and you'll thrive. Think about that looking through cycles of times of prosperity versus the opposite, or even small modern examples like 2008 to, times before and after, or recent. Cyclical nature. Once you know this cyclical nature, then you can adapt and flow with it, and all living, and you'll thrive. All right, back to what Dr. Dyer is saying here. An ending may feel like no reason. Actually, let's go ahead, just because to keep you interested. If you want to read every bit of this for yourself, I do most chapters, but just to keep it flowing along for you and to maybe get you to get the book for yourself, because having these physical copies is important. So I'll leave a link in the description box below if you want. But all right, let's continue a little bit further on. Lao-tzu tells you that a sense of inner peace comes with returning to the source, where all cycles begin and end. This is the fulfillment of your own personal destiny. That is, you're here to know and be the Tao, the constant beyond the comings and goings of life. You've been in many bodies already, and you're in a new one every day. You've been in and out of many relationships, yet the eternal you survives despite transitions from beginnings back into endings. You're now being urged to know yourself as a physical creation and as a piece of the everlasting Tao. And so I'm thinking of like when, you're younger, when you're a kid and you can fly 20 feet in the air off of a bike jump. I remember doing bike jumps or skateboard, all kinds of stuff. And, even though I'm still a kid, quote unquote, I guess we're all kids, aren't we? But, your body changes over time. And even though in the mind, you can still think those things, like you could go do it now, but your body would react totally differently. It's like that eternal part of you that exists beyond the physical aging part of you. Such a great thing, I think, for us to recognize and remember and connect to. All right. That Tao, I'm not sure what the perfect pronunciation of that is. If you do, leave it in the comment below and let me know. All right. That Tao that animates all existences, including your own, is totally impartial. See, that's key. It plays no favorites. It brings winter regardless of whether you want it or not. And I'll add there, winter doesn't follow winter. There's these cycles. All right, back to it. It sends those you love onto other, It sends those you love onto other people and then back, irrespective of your desires to have it otherwise. Interesting way to say it. All of life must return to it. There are no exceptions or apologies. When you're unaware of this steadying influence, you attach to one element of one cycle in life. That's a key sentence there. Mark that one in your mind. When you're unaware of the impartiality of the universal force that animates all existence, I'm kind of putting some of his words here together to paraphrase what I'm getting in my mind. Animates all existence, including your own, plays no favor. It brings whatever you put out to it. So if you're thinking about what you don't want, it's going to say, here's what you don't want, which is paradoxical. But so it just, and when you're unaware of all of these steadying influences, we attach to one element of only one cycle in life, leading us, I'm going back into what Wayne Dyer's saying here, leading to what Lao-tzu calls eternal disaster. When one person leaves you, see, then he takes it a different way. I was thinking about manifesting, kind of thinking about hermetics and using universal force in life to animate and influence and create our lives on purpose, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what we should be doing. But so Wayne Dyer goes on, when one person leaves you, it feels like the end of the world. When a business venture fails, you flunk out of school, or you have painful illness or injury, you feel depressed. If you get trapped in these emotional endings, you're not permitting them to also be a natural part of life. I'll add the word alchemical part of life. The transmutation of, dung into soil, into flowers. We've talked about it. Leading you to feel, I'll read that last sentence again. If you get trapped in these emotional endings, you're not permitting them to also be a natural part of life, leading you to feel disconnected from your source. See, that's that universal. You become stuck in the quote unquote rush of worldly comings and goings, unable to remember the constancy where endings become beginnings. This is powerful. See, I totally didn't expect this. Sorry, as I adjust my position. The reality is that beginnings are often disguised as, constancy. Beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. So when you know that there's a constant beyond the present moment disappointment, I'll add like a lesson. That's sometimes what helps me in tough moments. Is it's like, okay, everything is teaching me, When you know there's a constant beyond the present moment disappointment, you can sense that this too shall pass. That's another good way to look at it. It always has and always will. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. This is what Lao-tzu seems to be telling you in the 16th chapter of the Tao Te Ching. Take time to be an impartial observer of life, particularly when an ending is causing despair, Wayne Dyer says. He describes by saying, remind yourself that your source is at work within this event. Interesting. And then make a decision to connect to that source with your thoughts. All endings are part of the cyclical process. You're merely returning to a life of constancy, which Lao-tzu taught in this passage. You don't have to learn anything new, change any behavior, or adopt any new strategies. Just think about the word return. And take comfort in the ever constant Tao, or whatever it is that you like to call it. God, source, force, universal energy, which brings peace to despair. What does that? Love. That's once we discover the true power of love, it will be like when we first discover fire. I don't know if you know who coined that one, leave that in the comments too. I'd like to remember that, even though it'd probably be a simple Google search. The Tao never leaves or disappoints, and it is always impartial, Wayne Dyer continues, wherever you are in the emotional cycle. You're not being judged, rather, you're learning to be in all phases, free of judgment and living with constancy. And then he advises us here, write these words and post them in a conspicuous place in your living environment. This too shall pass. Especially if you're going through tough times, like put that on your phone background. This phrase will remind you that change is the only constant in life. Everything you notice is in a cycle of coming and going. Everything. There are no exceptions. Know this, and let your thoughts flow in the constancy of change. Which, see, that's this key paradox right there. I was thinking of, I'm sorry to keep cutting in, but this is the purpose of me doing this rather than somebody just listening to an audiobook, is we can expand on thought. And so the cycle of coming and going, everything, there are no exceptions. Know this, and see right there, the devil's advocate saying, what if somebody's stuck in a rut for 25 years and they're like, it's never changing? The constancy of change, it's a paradox. Everything we notice is in a cycle of coming and going. People are like, no, it's never changing. Everything, there are no exceptions. Know this, and let your thoughts flow in the constancy of change. See, the constancy is the you beyond the ever-changing. So I just pontificating here that if your life is never changing, then maybe it's not the world around you, but it's you that's never changing. And I'm always trying to change myself for the better. Because if we're not trying to grow, then boom. All right. Let's finish this one up. Wayne Dyer gives us a suggestion here. Do the Tao now. Dedicate a day to consciously seeking situations to practice impartiality, observing endings as beginnings. That's a confusing one in itself there. All right. Challenging yourself to find a specific number by noon. So we're going to take a day to see situations impartially, so without judging it or thinking that we know it, seeing the endings as the beginnings, and maybe even vice versa, and catch quite a few of them by noon. What would that be? That'd be like you. That's one to think on. Let's see if he really explains it here, if I don't cut him off again. All right, sorry. Begin in the morning by being aware that the end of a sleep is the beginning of a wake. Break your waking time into sections, noticing without judging that the endings that make space for beginnings. Notice without judging the endings that make space for beginnings. Start to consciously live with constancy by opening your mind to the fact that change is the only certain thing. Remember to include all of your feelings in its cycle. Wow. Impartially observing sad, for instance, permits its natural ending to transform to a beginning happy or positive. I added that, but he said, you're doing the Tao! Exclamation point. He knows if you got that last bit, then you're doing the Tao now. Let's see, that's transmutation. We got some good stuff to be learned from this. That's a boom, ladies and gentlemen. There's some booms going on. And the next one, and see, this is one of the great things about the Tao, is it goes into leadership. Because, Lao-tzu was kind of talking about the rulership that was going on at the time. I'd have to do more research, but he wasn't just talking about the most profound spiritual understandings, but he goes into society and, great wisdom, practical wisdom. And the next one, Dr. Dyer titles, Living as an Enlightened Leader. And that will be the 17th verse of the Tao Te Ching next week, next Tuesday. I'm excited for that one. I'm enjoying these each more and more as we go through. And man, I'm going to have to go back and think on this one. It had me thinking a lot of understanding the cyclical nature of life and creation. I'm going to have to think of a good title, but if you got value, consider subscribing, leave me a comment, and let me know that you watched. And I'll continue doing this for those of you that you know who it's for. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Love you. Oh yeah, check the description below if you want to buy one of my paintings. I'm going to keep painting paintings as well. I enjoy that. All right. Seek to enjoy and maintain the peace and happiness in your life.